Well, welcome to the American Vindictive Show. Thanks for being with us here today. We're going to go over a little bit of a history lesson over Starfish Prime, and then we are going to hit the news. And we are sadly not void of the news today. There is so much going on out there where this current administration is trying to literally ruin America on the international theater scale. And not only that, but now we have new reports that the CCP has declared us to be an enemy, and the United States Army is officially at the weakened status. How could this possibly go wrong? We'll be back, and we'll talk about this right after this break.
Klaus Schwab from the World Economic Forum has said, "You will own nothing, and you will love it." And that's represented by what's going on across the planet today, where the economy of the world is in free fall, and nowhere is it more in evidence than with our own President Biden deliberately trying to sabotage what we have. Access to food, other resources. So Americans are in a unique position, really for the first time in our history. We're going to have to provide for ourselves or subject ourselves to the whim of the government. Do you really trust a government to feed you that left 1,000 Americans behind enemy lines in Afghanistan? I don't think so. So where do you go? When you ask the question, who's the best prepper out there today? There's only one answer. Ready-Made Resources and Robert Griswold. I call him King Prepper, and that's how a lot of people think of him. You have everything there you'd want, from night vision to storable food, how to prepare cooking in emergency situations, books and videos on how to prepare alternative energy, communication, first aid that you wouldn't think of, natural antibiotics, you name it. Bob has it. Now, here's the good thing about Bob Griswold that no one else does but him. You don't have to buy anything to talk to him. If you're not sure where to start with your preparation, no obligation phone call directly to Bob. You can talk to him for free. Most people will charge you an arm and a leg for a half-hour conversation. That's not Bob Griswold. He cares about helping America get prepared. Go to readymaderesources.com, or you can call the number directly at 800-627-3809. Again, that contact information, readymaderesources.com, for the best prepping outfit in the country, or call Bob Griswold directly, 800-627-3809.
All right, so welcome back. So recently I was covering the type of things that can happen during a nuclear blast between the cold zone, the warm zone, the hot zone. And I wanted to actually dig a little bit into the history of kind of where the electromagnetic pulse came from, and the fact that our military and scientists now have gone, unfortunately, way beyond just an accidental EMP that was caused by a thermonuclear warhead. But we'll save that for another time. So for right now, enjoy this history lesson. So, Starfish Prime. Starfish Prime was a high-altitude nuclear test that was conducted by the U.S. It was a joint effort of the Atomic Energy Commission and the Defense Atomic Support Agency. It was launched from Johnson Atoll on July 9th, 1962. It was the largest nuclear test conducted in outer space and one of 5 conducted by the U.S. in space. A Thor rocket was the rocket used to carry the Whiskey 49 thermonuclear warhead. Designed, of course, at Los Alamos Scientific Laboratory, and also a Mark II reentry vehicle, which was launched from the Johnson Atoll in the Pacific Ocean, about 900 miles west-southwest of Hawaii. The explosion took place at an altitude of about 250 miles, and that was above a point 19 miles southwest of the Johnson Atoll. It had a yield of 1.4 megatons. The explosion was about 10 degrees above the horizon as seen from Hawaii, and at 11 p.m. Hawaii time. So Starfish Prime, or the Starfish test, was one of 5 high-altitude tests that were grouped together during Operation Fishbowl within the larger Operation Dominic. And this was a series of tests in 1962 that began in response to the Soviet announcement on August 30th, 1961, that they would end a 3-year moratorium on testing. In 1958, the United States had completed 6 high-altitude nuclear tests that produced many unexpected results, and it raised many new questions. According to the U.S. government, Project Officer's interim report on the Starfish Prime project quotes, "At previous high-altitude nuclear tests, Yucca, Teak, and Orange, plus the 3 Argus shots, were poorly instrumented and hastily executed. Despite thorough studies of the meager data, present models of these bursts are sketchy and tentative. These models are too uncertain to permit extrapolation to other altitudes and yields with any confidence. Thus, there is a strong need not only for better instrumentation, but for further tests covering a range of altitudes and yields." The Starfish test was originally planned as the second in the Operation Fishbowl series, but the first launch, which was Bluegill, was lost by the radar tracking equipment and had to be destroyed in flight. The initial Starfish launch, which was an attempt on June 20th, was also aborted in flight, this time due to the failure of the Thor launch vehicle, the Thor missile. So the Thor missile flew a normal trajectory for about 59 seconds, then the rocket engine stopped, and then the missile began to break apart. The range safety officer ordered the destruction of the missile and also the warhead. The missile was about 30,000 to 35,000 feet in altitude when it was initially destroyed. Parts of the missile and some of the radioactive contamination, unfortunately, fell upon Johnson Atoll and the nearby Sand Island and the surrounding ocean, which, if you didn't know, Bikini Atoll, Bikini Island, the whole place where SpongeBob SquarePants is based off of, the adult-like children's cartoon. It's actually based in this area. So, on July 9th, 1962, at about 9 in the morning, the Starfish Prime test was detonated at an altitude of 250 miles up. The coordinates of the detonation are, let's say, a little bit above where everything should have been safe for this type of test based on the knowledge that we had back in the 60s. Now, the actual weapon yield came very close to the design yield, the actual explosive estimation, which various sources have set at different values in the range of 1.4 to 1.45 megatons. The nuclear warhead detonated actually 13 minutes and 41 seconds after liftoff of the Thor missile from the Johnson Atoll. So 13 minutes and 41 seconds of flight, heading 250 miles up, and then the missile exploded. I would dare bet with the rocketry that we have now that a nuclear warhead, a thermonuclear warhead, would reach 250 miles in half that time. So Starfish Prime, here's the juicy part. And this is a part I want you to consider. And I'll say this as a pitch for a book. Probably one of my favorite book series to read, if not my favorite book, is 1 Second After. 1 Second After I read back in 2011, 2012. And that book really changed my paradigm. It really changed my entire methodology of preparation I never took preparation to be that serious until I read this book and freaked myself out. And then, of course, by that point in time, I've already been with the federal government. So then I start to learn a little bit more that helped freak me out and realize that I really needed to have a better system of planning and prepping. And the whole basis behind the book, One Second After, is what happens when multiple EMPs are exploded at about this 250 to 300 mile range above the atmosphere of the United States. So this is where we get this original dogmatic way of thinking of prepping. EMP is really the worst case scenario in my mind for any type of doomsday-like weapon that could happen in the U.S. The only thing that I would say that would be worse than EMP, which would have an EMP-like effect, just not from a thermonuclear blast, but would probably be the Belgorod, the thermonuclear submarine vessel that would be launched and striking off the coast of the United States and then causing not only possibly a 3,000-foot tall radioactive tsunami, but also it could be setting off seismic events that could be a complete cataclysm for the United States. So I kind of juggle both these back and forth. Of course, also the Ruskies threatened to hit the Yellowstone volcano with a nuclear weapon, thus more or less ending North America. But I think that is just more or less a gross use for a threat, because if the supervolcano goes off, then almost the entire world will perish because of it, because it will start an entire new ice age, block out the sun, all that cool stuff, right? So I don't think that'll happen. But on the other hand, I do think they would actually hit the coastlines with nuclear weapons. That's catastrophe on like a scale that no one has ever seen, besides maybe Fukushima, but even then, Fukushima's nothing compared to what I'm talking about. But EMP, all right, you want to take America off the playing board. You use multiple strategic EMP strikes. Now, I've talked to other military members, other people in the government about this before, and we always ramble when we talk about these types of threats and contingencies, and the type of countermeasures that we can have in place in case of these large grid downscale type of attacks. And really, there is options, but they're limited options, because eventually we're talking about fuel sources, and you do eventually run out of fuel sources. And by that time, if we can't get something up and running, or if our allies don't come and save us, well, we're kind of screwed. And so the book, 1 Second After, I think it beautifully explains the dangers in a very, how would you say, adventurous, sad at the same time, entertaining type of way. But still, even the book will not be able to cover the magnitude of a direct EMP style hit. And and once again, don't forget, thermonuclear weapons are airburst. Okay, so they're not going to be hitting cities like you always see in all these freaking commercials or History Channel stuff, or the stuff that they have on like TV and movies. That's not militarily accurate for these large nuclear ICBMs. They're going to be at an air burst, so they're going to explode like a fuel air bomb right above the populace, because once again, that's how you get that big overpressure blast wave destroying everything. But let's get back into what I was originally going to tell you about. Starfish Prime, all right, it caused an electromagnetic pulse, and that was far larger than expected, so much larger that it actually drove most of the instrumentation completely off the scale, causing great difficulty in even getting accurate measurements. The Starfish Prime electromagnetic pulse also made those effects known to the public by causing electrical damage in Hawaii, which was about 900 miles away from the detonation point, knocking out over 300 streetlights, setting off numerous burglar alarms, and damaging a telephone company microwave link. The EMP damaged the microwave link, which shut down telephone calls from Kauai to the other Hawaiian islands, actually. Think of what it would do today. In the 60s, our technology was really just, really starting to expand and to become smaller and more efficient. But even so, everything back then was still really breakthrough technology. And what we have now is a even more fragile electric system. I mean, between the small processors, the phones, the internet, look at how much stuff just alone runs off the internet. I know for a fact that whenever the storms happen in my north side of Texas, if you try to go to Walmart, if you try to go to Tractor Supply, go get some feed, or if you need to go to Dollar General or wherever store, what are you not going to be able to do immediately because the power is out? You're probably not going to be able to pump gas. You're not going to be able to buy anything unless you have exact cash. And even then, some of these cash registers now don't work unless it is hooked up to power and then hooked up to the internet. So you may not be able to buy produce. You may not be able to buy any type of dry goods. You can't get fuel. So what do you do when the power goes out? Well, you just sit and you wait for the power to come back on. Well, with a large EMP, you may be sitting for months until somebody figures out something. I do think that the scientific community and good old American / redneck ingenuity, we would be splicing wires and hooking stuff up to batteries and PTO-driven generators and everything that you can think of just to get a semblance of power back on. But if we don't, oh man, you're talking about a problem. You're talking about a big problem. Anything that is refrigerated is fixing to be completely done with. You have to now cook it if it's meat, and you're going to have to probably salt it or smoke it. If it's ice cream, go ahead and eat it now because it ain't going to be there tomorrow. The frozen foods like the vegetables, they will only last for so long. So after a large EMP, especially in today's world, that first week, whatever food it was that you had, if you cannot properly store it again, it's going to be cooked. And what happens after that? What happens after the meat markets, the grocery stores, your refrigerator, your deep freeze? When all that stuff is thawed, you've run out of food. Now what do you do? Well, that's when you get into the book 1 Second After, and you start to hear this conversation between the council, which is an old colonel who was in the military. His name's John. He's the main character. He's also a history professor. And then it comes into the security coordinator for the town, the mayor, the police chief, and I guess the most senior doctor of the town. And they all more or less devise how to keep this community alive, and that it's their responsibility. And, rightly so, the doctor actually has most of the say of what should happen based off of how to treat illnesses, how to pre-treat people that are on some sort of psychotic medication that's now going to be unavailable within the next month or two. And, I do, because I'm rereading this book for probably like the 90th time. I do like the fact that the doctor says, you know what, we should probably just go ahead and forego the Constitution and start making arrests now on people who we know are on antipsychotics. We know people that are severely criminalized. That means people that are institutionalized who've been out of prison and they're continuously getting back and forth in trouble. Imagine law enforcement being told by your city council that every cow, every goat, every chicken, every turkey, maybe even every dog and every cat will be rounded up and confiscated, and that will be put in a big community center with security attaches covering it, and that is what's going to be used to pull from to make the big soups for the town, to make the big meals for the town that you'll get once a day with your ration card. And in it, the doctor actually goes into the various die-offs, which is something that's not really talked about within the prepping community, but it is something that needs to be talked about, because you are going to have 3 or 4 die-offs. You're going to have people who are initially going to die that were on any type of life support, and then you're going to have people that were on any type of medications that you only get through the next day delivery. So once that stuff's not delivered, they're going to die. People who are insulin resistant, type 1, type 2 diabetics, they may, it's hard to talk about. They may only have a couple months left. People who are on dialysis machines, they're finally going to die off. And then you're going to have these series of illnesses, from cholera to malaria to even something like the basic cold. Now, I want you to consider, like this last pandemic, even with all the health officials running around with their heads cut off, everyone was trying to do the right thing to an extent. But you got to understand something. With an actual pandemic, when we don't have the medications, when we don't have the sanitation departments up and running, your ability to get sick will be 99 times greater than getting into an epic firefight with somebody. Which is one of the reasons why in prepping, I tell people, like, guns are like number 9 on my list. Medication, knowing medical training is probably number 1 and number 2. And then everything else from there is just, how do you categorize prepping? Because you're going to have shelter, food, fire, water, the ability to purify the food, purify the water, materials for the shelter, the ability to have cooking sources, so fire, maintaining your basic life, maintaining your family, and also your elements of security, and then also your food on the hoof. These are the things that take precedence before the gun does, in my mind. Now, I'm not saying don't buy it. I'm just saying, unless you plan on eating a bullet, you need to make sure that you have other stuff to eat. Because I do know guys who, for the life of me, I don't know why, they'll have about 60 guns, all these different AR-15s. You can fire 1 if you're really cool, 2 of them at a time. Why do you need so many? And they'll say, well, because the government's going to take them. Buddy, the government's coming for your food. And they're going to use the guns to get your food. And I get it. Let's have guns. But, it's the food. Even Henry Kissinger said that. You want to control the people, control the food. And that is really, one of the next weakest links in America that we have is our ability to store food. And when the power goes out, people just don't understand that your entire world is going to change. You're not going to be able to go get your soybean latte. You're not going to go be able to get your fat-free, cholesterol low bagel and cream cheese and whatever it is that the yuppies eat now. You are going to be living back in 18th century America, 17th century America. And one of the easiest ways to prep for that, I've said it before, I'll say it again, is buy copious amounts of rice, bread flour, all-purpose flour, baking powder, sugar, salt. Have chickens for your eggs. You may laugh. Get you an old butter churner. Once again, it sounds funny until you run out of butter. So, you're going to have to learn to do things the old way. And the best way to do that, honestly, is getting on YouTube and learning how people do it. And just watch it over and over and over again. Record it on your own phone if you have to, and then go and practice it. The practical application of learning these skills may save your life. They may save your family's life. Hell, may save your community's life. All right? You may be the one guy or gal on the block who at one point in time, you worked a 9 to 5 at a corporate office, and now you're the actual baker of the area because you're the only one who knew how to bake. Everybody's going to have a skill. Everybody's going to have a need. But then also everyone's going to have a threshold. Everyone is going to have a threshold where they will say, at this point in time in my life, I cannot sustain myself, support my family. I'm going to have to turn to either other people or I'm going to have to go to the federal government. And we always want you to turn to other people instead of the federal government. But just understand that during this point of time in this chaotic world, this hypothetical chaotic world that we're talking about, after America's power grid is taken down, nothing comes for free. You're either going to have to work for food or you're going to have to do other work for food, or you're going to turn to crime. So, all this that I'm talking about is brought to you by Starfish Prime. It's the reason why I take this seriously is because, even with today's schmucks that run the government, the Nuclear EMP Commission has said it for, almost 20 years now? Harden the grid. Harden the grid. Texas, hello, Governor Abbott. Harden the grid. Get us off this freaking new Green Deal windmills that suck. They didn't do anything during the ice storm. If Greg Abbott does not fix Texas energy within the next, let's say, 6 months to a year, he needs to be impeached. He needs to be out of office or vote him out. Get somebody who will actually do it. And if it were me, the mere fact that Texas sells most of its energy to Ukraine right now and to other places around the world and not to our people is traitorous. It is treason beyond treason, because the moment we don't have power anymore, we don't sustain our lives anymore, and immediately hundreds of thousands of people are going to die within the first day. And then it just, the multitude of that death toll grows exponentially every single day, and it gets worse every single day because then crime goes up. And then the heat waves come in, and then you have the rain seasons that come in, and with all these different things, the dying of crops, the dying of the food on the hoof, or the new explosion of mosquitoes bringing in Zika virus and malaria and dengue fever and all this other crap, it only compounds everything. It only makes everything worse. And we literally have the ability, with our technology, to harden the grid. And it's not done. Ask yourself that. Ask your representatives who always want money from you, who always want the money to go and eat a steak dinner with some douchebag who is out there for the military industrial complex, but never for the industry of keeping your butt alive. Nancy Pelosi, worth $300 million. Did she ever spend any of it on the grid? Looking at you, California, you are screwed the moment the power goes down. You think your border's been invaded now, Texas, Arizona, New Mexico. Just wait till the freaking power's out. And nobody mans the border patrol checkpoints anymore. Oh, did you hear recently what happened in Roma, Texas? with the freaking cartels gunfighting each other right across the river. We filmed it. It's on Fox News. We filmed it with our own drones. They had 50 cal machine guns. 50 caliber machine guns made by the US of A, firing at one another, put up in their little Technicals and their little Toyotas and Fords. Law enforcement doesn't have an answer for 50 cals, just FYI. So when those things are pointed at the border stations and coming over the border stations, Border Patrol is going to run for their lives. If they're even there. If they're even there. America will be a third world country in 12 hours when the power goes down. And I have been in dozens of third world countries. And I'm just telling you right now, we don't have the tenacity for that survival as Americans. Between myself and even the most freaking prepped, extreme guy that's out there, we have never had to learn to survive with poverty and to thrive in poverty. We will be at that point in time on the same scale as some of the most impoverished countries in Africa. And look how well that's going there. All right. We're going to go to a break, and we'll be right back. Mountain State Survival covers your basis for your planning, prepping, evacuation, bugging in, or bugging out needs. They carry anything from educational material, camping supplies, emergency services supplies, food, first aid, survival kit and equipment, shooting gear, survival gear, tactical gear. They carry it all. They got it in stock. Give Mountain State Survival a ring. That's mountain-state-survival.com. Get this type of supplies while you still can. 304-517-6935. Mountain State Survival is one of the only places that I know of currently that is still carrying the delicious Peak Refuel meal that is ready to eat. It's personally the only thing that I eat at this point whenever I go out camping, whenever we have any type of emergency or disaster situation. That is the meal that I stick with, and you can find that at mountain-state-survival.com. Use REKKR5 for a 5% discount on your overall purchase. That's REKKR 5, mountain-state-survival.com. All right, welcome back. So if we're ever hit with an EMP, it's going to look very similar to Starfish Prime. So after the thermonuclear warhead was detonated 250 miles up, there were witnessed bright auroras observed, obviously, in the detonation area, but as well in the southern conjugate region, which is on the other side of the equator from the detonation. And according to one of the first technical results, the visible phenomena due to the burst were widespread and quite intense. A very large area of the Pacific was illuminated by the auroral phenomena. From far south of the South Magnetic Conjugate area, which was Tonga, and that was through the burst area, to far north of the conjugate area, which would be the French frigate shoals. So at twilight, after the burst, the resonant scattering of the light from the lithium and other debris was actually observed at Johnson and French frigate shoals, Johnson Atoll and French frigate shoals, for many days, confirming the long-time presence of the debris in the atmosphere. An interesting side effect was that the Royal New Zealand Air Force was aided in the anti-submarine maneuvers actually by the light from the bomb. So what does that mean? That means that the light from the bomb, 250 miles up, was so bright that it actually helped the submarines under the ocean navigate the waters. That is crazy amount of energy. These auroral effects were partially anticipated by Nicholas Christophilus, who was a scientist who had earlier worked on Operation Argus, which was a high-altitude nuclear bomb explosion. And according to the U.S. atomic veteran Cecil R. Cole, some hotels in Hawaii offered rainbow bomb parties on their roofs for Starfish Prime, contradicting some reports that the artificial aurora was unexpected. It was completely expected. And if there's ever a point in time where we have a radiance of the sky, unlike the actual auroral phenomena, it's not going to be the pretty yellows and blues and greens. The energy that was actually produced from the nuclear blast as it was bouncing off Earth's magnetic field and illuminating the sky was a reddish orange. And if you go to, the web, well, let me see. If you go to more or less any internet site out there, you'll be able to type in Starfish Prime, and you'll be able to look at the actual debris of the fireball. And tell me as you look at that you're not looking at something that was spoken of during Revelation. It is, I think, America's future. I think America's future is a series of EMP blasts that completely wipes us off the world stage. And I don't think there's very much we can do about it. These EMP blasts will be able to be seen from the East Coast to the West Coast. The EMP effects will be able to be felt from San Francisco to Colorado. The EMP effects will be able to be felt from Maine, to Maryland. So how many EMPs does it really take? It takes 3. It takes 3 EMPs to blanket America. And, our electromagnetic grid, our electric grid is so fragile and on the brink of fracturing all the time already. The amount of fires that would probably happen from all the electric power generation stations going down, or energy lines being just completely overzapped with energy and possibly exploding, which is one of the possibilities that the scientists have worked on, that there is a high probability that the power lines could just explode. And just think of how many random fires that could cause, or forest fires. And if we don't have power and we don't have electricity, how are we going to fight that? It is a serious threat. It is a serious threat. And I don't know why, but our government just completely, they completely ignore it. They completely ignore it, yet they know who has the ability to commit such an attack. Depending on the source, the origin of an EMP can actually, be natural or artificial. So it could be a CME coming from the sun, or it could be through thermonuclear detonation. But one way or the other, we're not ready for it. We're just not. You're not ready for it. I'm not ready for it. Nobody is ready for it. If you had to prepare for something like this, I would tell you that natural gas, even as expensive as it is probably one of the safest best ways to store this type of energy, opposed to gasoline and diesel. If Doug had the ability, I would have probably a daisy-chained amount of 500 to 1,000 gallon tanks buried under the ground. I'd probably have at least 8 or 10 of them daisy-chained together, and that's what I would feed my house with. And I would have, probably something for a deep freeze and a small refrigerator, and then another one going to maybe, I don't know, maybe an oven. But I would limit it to just that. Literally, I would limit it to just that. And I say that because, you don't need hot water to bathe. It's a luxury. You can learn to cook outside. You can learn to cook on the ground. You don't have to cook inside. But on the off chance, you have it. But why would I want a gas range stove then? Because if you need to make anything with a constant fire, that's the best place to do it. Obviously, the refrigerator for storing medicines, or milk, because if not, you're going to have to go back to the old times, and you're going to have to get jars and stainless steel containers. And once again, the problem with this type of prepping for this type of environment is an entire change of lifestyle, which means an entire change of mindset, which means you should have been reading these books years ago and practicing these things years ago. Now, nothing is saying that you can't get you a couple books on preparation and start learning it now, practicing now, but you'll at least know how long things actually last. It's a disruption. That's all I'm saying. It's a disruption to communications. It damages electrical equipment. Just look what a lightning strike to the wrong power grid can do. There is no we live in a unprotected infrastructure. I get so frustrated thinking about this. And our Congress chooses to fund, every different type of idea or operation that has nothing to do with keeping Americans alive. And they're not going to change. Maybe the next president will change. Maybe Ron DeSantis will get in and then everything will change. But I don't live on the maybes. Maybe doesn't keep you alive when the event has happened. And I say all this because we are literally on the precipice of nuclear war. Now, there's a lot of political pundits out there who are talking about nuclear war. And there's a lot of people who, they sound very impressive. Some of them sound very thoughtful, but almost none of them have ever been in war, nor have most of them ever experienced actual hardship. So, and no offense to Tucker Carlson and all these other guys, but, these guys are better prepared than you and I are. They have millions upon millions upon millions of dollars. We don't. So we have to rely upon each other, upon prayer, obviously to God, and we have to rely upon our ingenuity. And after that, it's just, your toughness, your sternness to survive. So before I get off this topic, I just want to tell you one of the weapons that can be used for this. And it's called a nuclear electromagnetic pulse, or NEP. A nuclear electromagnetic pulse is the abrupt pulse of a electromagnetic radiation resulting obviously from a nuclear explosion. The resulting rapidly changing electric fields and magnetic fields that will couple with electrical systems will produce damaging currents and voltage surges throughout whatever that parameter is, whatever that blast perimeter eventually is. If it's like the One from Starfish Prime, that's 900 miles. 900 miles worth of an EMP. And that was at 1.4 megatons. And we're talking about, between China, the US, Iran, Russia, everybody has well over 1.4 megatons. So expect that blast zone to be much more damaging and much wider in proximity. So the intense gamma radiation that's emitted, it also causes the ionizing of the surrounding air, which creates a secondary EMP as the atoms of air first lose their electrons and then regain them. So this nuclear electromagnetic pulse, these weapons are designed to maximize such EMP effects as the primary damaging mechanism. And some are capable of destroying susceptible electronic equipment over a very, very wide area, which would include your sensitive electronic equipment, i.e. the cell phone. So the high altitude electromagnetic pulse, this is the killer for the nations. That's the HEMP, high altitude electromagnetic pulse. It is a nuclear electromagnetic pulse weapon with a warhead that is designed to be detonated far above the Earth's surface. The explosion will release a blast of gamma rays into the mid-stratosphere, which then ionizes as a secondary effect, and the resultant energetic free electrons will interact with the Earth's magnetic field, and it will produce an even stronger EMP effect than is normally produced in the dense air at lower altitudes. So what does that mean? So that means if Russia or China or whoever, or the United States, was going to nuke America, hitting one city is not the biggest bang for your buck. It'll still produce an electromagnetic pulse. It won't be as effective. You'll have the optics of the nuclear blast. But, let's just target New York City here for an example. If they nuked New York City, then that's all they did, was they just nuked New York City. You'll have the fallout that'll affect all the surrounding states and also the Atlantic Ocean. But after that, Texas isn't going to mind. If you think about it, that type of an attack is local. So it really only affects local areas within that tri-state area, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York. So for the bigger bang, for the bigger buck, you take the missile and you send it 250 to 300 miles in the air so that whenever the explosion happens, the bubbling effect of the stratosphere will catch all that ionizing radiation, will catch all of the electromagnetic pulse, and it will reverberate and come right back down stronger. Who the hell thinks of this type of stuff? Who thinks of this? Now, there's another thing out there that's called a non-nuclear electromagnetic pulse. And this is a weapon-generated electromagnetic pulse that is without use of nuclear technology. And these devices can achieve this objective to include a large, low inductance capacitor bank, which is discharged into a single-loop antenna or a microwave generator, and an explosively pumped flux compression generator. More or less, it is an EMP gun. And Russia has used it a couple times against our own Navy and against our own aircraft. Successfully. And we don't like to talk about that very much in the U.S. military and in the government, but they were successful. And we don't have those things. If we do, they're not as advanced and not on the same scale as Russia's. So to achieve this frequency of characteristics of the pulse that is needed for the optimal coupling into a target, the wave shaping circuits or microwave generators are added between the pulse source and then the antenna. And that is where we're creating the microwave conversion of high energy pulses. So these non-nuclear electromagnetic pulse weapons or generators can actually be carried as a payload for a bomb or for a cruise missile. If you didn't know, we do have an EMP cruise missile. It's called CHAMP. And also our drones carry this technology. And with diminished mechanical, thermal, and ionizing radiation effects, but without the consequences of deploying a nuclear weapon. So we do have the ability to have a localized EMP event without the thermobaric explosion. Which one do you think would be used? If you were going to invade a country and you wanted its resources and you needed its people to still run the country after you've won it, do you really want to nuke it? No. No, you want to take the power grid out. Let them figure out how to take their own power and turn it back on, and everyone who dies from it is just one less person you're going to have to fight. That's the way to think about these types of things. And that's the way America will be viewed. America will be viewed as a workforce for China and Russia when they eventually come to invade. We will be looked as an enslaved population. I think many people think that they're going to join their communist brethren, and then they're going to be sorely surprised when they too get thrown into the gulag after they are no longer useful. The range of a non-nuclear electromagnetic pulse is much less than a nuclear EMP, obviously. But these devices, once used as weapons, require chemical explosives as their initial energy source. The energy typically of nuclear explosions of similar weight, but not the same effect. The electromagnetic pulse from a non-nuclear electromagnetic pulse weapon must come from within the weapon itself, while nuclear weapons generate the EMP as a secondary effect. Now, these facts limit the range of these weapons, but allow finer target discrimination. So, if I wanted to aim the CHAMP missile into New York City and take out the hub of New York City without taking out New York City, then I use the electromagnetic weapon of CHAMP. If I wanted to wipe New York City off the map and make sure that the rocks there glow for 1,000 years, I use a thermobaric weapon, a thermonuclear warhead. These are things that are being talked about and discussed right now, if you didn't know this, between the small electromagnetic bombs which have been proven to be sufficient for certain terrorist and military operations, to the much larger, much more controversial, much more deadly thermonuclear weapons. One of these we can get actually prepared for. The other one we can't. You cannot get prepared for a thermonuclear warhead dropping on a city near you, but you can get prepared for an EMP. Now, I'm not going to tell you to, go and charge out your credit card. I'm not going to tell you to, waste all your money buying this product and buying that product. There's plenty of guys out there. Go to them. I'm here to sell you information. What I will tell you is that if it were me, and one of the things that I do plan on doing, you can set up your own electric grid through solar panels. But, understand that solar panels are finicky. The technology has grown increasingly. I personally just say go with goal zero. Goal Zero, GOAL 0. Just because it's all plug and play. It's very easy. I mean, an idiot can do it. And if I'm the idiot and I can do it, then you can do it. Now, I'll say this, though. Depending on the weather, depending on the time of year, your solar panels are not going to charge your batteries as well. But if you had giant solar battery banks, that should help. I don't know exactly what an EMP would do to the Gold Zero power generators. And I had them for the longest time, but whenever I got deployed to Haiti with Gary Haven, I gave my entire like $2,000 or $3,000 Goal Zero system up to the doctors that we were inserting into Lakai of Haiti. And so, I showed them how to use it, and they set up shop wherever they set up shop at. But I do like the fact that it's very easy. It's very, very easy to plug and play. Don't get the foldable backpack stuff. That's literally just good enough to charge your cell phone at a slow rate. Get the bolder, large solar panels. And if you're really, really concerned about it, then you can spend a stupid amount of money on the EMP shield cases that people sell, the Faraday cage bags. I was just looking last night at Faraday cage bags, and the size of the one that would work for probably one or two of the solar power generators is like almost $400. So it's a ridiculous amount. And hopefully it works. Who knows, right? Who really knows? But it's better than having nothing. If not, if you don't have the solar power stuff, you don't have the ability to plug and play with lights, well, your next best thing is to invest in candles and invest in freaking, wood-fired ovens, because you're going to need it. Because this winter is going to get really bad. Just like everybody in Europe right now, who hopefully will have gas before it gets too bad. But if they don't, they're going to feel the pinch of winter. And many people, unfortunately, are going to suffer and die from it. And this war in the UK will spill out across the battlefield of Ukraine, and it will envelop the United Kingdom, the entire UK area. It'll envelop Europe. Russia will eventually have to get all the way involved, and which means the United States then will get all the way involved, and then it gets worse from there, folks. These are things that are being talked about at the war colleges. These are things that are being mapped out and pre-planned, and resources pre-positioned within the Pentagon. And if they're doing it, you should be doing it. Pre-plan and pre-position the assets that you need to survive now, not when it's time to panic. I was going to go over the news today, but I think God just kind of had me hone in on this for you. The effects of the EMP, I'll say this. The most powerful EMPs are already in possession by every nuclear country. Every country in the world that has a nuclear weapon has the most powerful EMPs. They have what it takes to knock down the power grid. So don't think that this is a fantasy. Don't think that this is not reality-based. It is. And nobody has a good answer for it. I don't. All I can tell you is that community preparedness is the best thing that you can do. Self-preparedness, community preparedness, getting training, getting your preps now, not wasting your entire 401k on some dude's special at whatever show. I'm telling you, this is the year not to go to Disneyland and to take that money and to invest it into preparedness goods. If we didn't have this type of threat going on right now, I'd be telling you what stocks to invest in. And I have friends of mine who invest in stocks all the time, and I know my way around it a little bit, but they're pulling out. A lot of people are pulling out. of these types of cushions because the threat is real and it's not going away. So that's all I got for you today. Sorry if I seemed a bit somber. This was just really pushed on my mind very, very hard today. So I'll pray about this. I ask that you do pray about it. Ask for a prayer for yourself that God helps you to prepare and in what ways you should. Everyone's going to be a little different, but the basics are the basics. Please pray for the show. Pray for me. I do thank all of you who have donated or who do donate to the show. If you do want to join the Patreon, you can go to the Patreon channel. And for as little as, I think, $3 to $5 a month, you can help support this show and keeping it on air. Once a month, we do an Ask Me Anything Zoom call interview where more or less that's all we're doing. We just, we talk for about an hour or two. I think we went almost 3 hours one night, just meeting and talking and, sharing information. So if you want to help join the Patreon, that'll help with the channel staying on. Make sure that you're training. Get outside. Get in shape. It's never too late. Make sure that you're prepping. You don't want to be too late in that. And make sure that you're praying. It's never too late to reach out to God. That's all I got for you. Stay frosty. The enemy's out there. You can find this show on the Heroes Nation app. Heroes Nation is the Heroes Nation app you can download in the App Store. It's up and coming. They got a lot of cool information on there. That is the main backup site so far for the American Vindicta Show. We'll also have some stuff on there that won't be on YouTube. It won't be on Rumble. It'll either be only on the gsradio.net, who is the host of the American Vindicta Show, or it will only be an exclusive for Heroes Nation. And with that, I mean, stuff that we're doing with the cave exploration, with the archaeological stuff. I'm going to start getting into a lot of paranormal talks and, coming at that from my law enforcement and Christian perspective, and be having guests on, and that will be exclusive to Heroes Nation. So make sure that you give them some love. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you, everybody, for supporting me. God bless you, and have a good day.